Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and I have Todd Evans back in the co-captain seat. How are you, my friend?
Very good, thank you. How are you doing, Peter?
Not too bad at all.
Good.
Today, we are going to do an episode on the saxophone. So I was putting some show ideas to Todd, and I was saying the saxophone really doesn't get the recognition it deserves in rock. It's used as a solo instrument. It's used as an instrument that covers a riff. And I thought it'd be a good idea for a show if we picked our 5 favorite songs that predominantly feature the saxophone or may have a smoking solo in the song. So all genres of rock, saxophone, it's got to be in it. So Todd, what's your first pick?
Okay, well, my first pick, and it was really interesting timing because one of the members of this particular band posted something on social media and basically said, I know you know the saxophone solo. And it sort of happened while we were talking about doing this show. And I was like, oh, that one's perfect. But and I don't have a physical copy of the original album this was on. But my first pick is I Can't Go For That, No Can Do by Daryl Hall and John Oates. And I absolutely love it. Played by Charlie Mr. Casual DeChant, who's one of my favorite saxophone players, has been with Hall & Oates forever and ever and ever. If you go see Hall & Oates in the current day, he's still in the band. He's 78 years old. And I absolutely love the guy. I saw them in 1982 when they were just at the top of their game. And I always knew that Charlie was a little bit older than Daryl and John. And he is. He's close to 80. But played on the alto saxophone. And the guy has played with Tina Turner, Billy Joel, Bonnie Raitt, just a whole bunch of people. But I absolutely love the saxophone solo, and I Can't Go For That, No Can Do. It's very simple, but very memorable. And I played saxophone in high school and college, and I played all of them, but my main instrument was alto saxophone. So whenever I hear an alto solo, I'm especially tuned in to it.
Great pick. Great song for the show. You cannot not think of that song and not think of the saxophone all the way through it. It's just a killer track, and they were really at the top of their game. And I think that's just wonderful. Yeah, Hall & Oates, I'm a unabashed fan of them. And
same here.
I've got nothing much more to say on that. I think that's a great pick.
It's not even a guilty pleasure. You can fight me. I don't care.
No, it's not. And I would have to say that, after 1986, their stocks started to go down, Hall & Oates. But as of late, I think in the last decade or so, their stocks have gone up. A lot of people are referencing their music, looking back at their discography and even their early discography, which is completely different to their soul years or the synth pop years, and thinking, gee, they were really a great band and still a viable live act. They're still out there and they're still touring. So I think their stocks are definitely on the ascendant. So
it's really strange for me to remember. I was always into 80s Hall & Oates, like Ecstatic and On, which is like 77 and on. And I never really went back to listen to those early albums until I got much older, but the early albums are just as good. I mean, they go through all these different phases and you can hear their transition. But
absolutely.
The thing that's so amazing about Hall & Oates is Daryl Hall's vocal performances are just so top notch. And John Oates, you can't take him out. You take John, everybody says, oh, well, Daryl Hall did everything. You take John Oates out and it's not right.
Yeah.
So if you hear like a Daryl Hall record, it's okay, but it's not the same. So
yeah. Well, I mean, solo, they didn't really have the commercial success, but together there's a synergy there. Those early albums, they're like a very fine, I would call it Americana. There's a lot of roots in it, and a lot of people need to discover it. Really, really good music.
I agree.
It's sort of some gems. So, all right, that's a great pick. I'm going to go, maybe it's a slightly obvious one. You've got to pick a Rolling Stones song. because they had so many great sax lines, sax players. You had Bobby Keys. But I'm going to go from an album which, to my way of thinking, is probably their last masterpiece or their last truly great album. And I'm talking Tattoo You. And it's the last song on the album, and it's called Waiting on a Friend. So you've got Sonny Rollins playing the tenor sax, and he's just going for it. I love this song. It's got a real sort of loose New York City 80s vibe. It's ragged. It's got a groove. It's just the Stones. And everything that encapsulates what I like about the Stones and how they play in the pocket, but they're so loose, Todd, is in this song. And you got Nicky Hopkins on piano, and around about 2 minutes into the song, Sonny Rollins does this riff, and it sort of incrementally gets more jazzy, and it's sort of like a snowball. It just builds up momentum, and it's got the best outro of any Rolling Stones song. Turn it up and you can hear it. He's still going and noodling as it, goes into the inner groove. But I think this is a fine album, and everyone talks about Start Me Up, but Waiting on a Friend is a gem of a song, and it's a great closing Rolling Stones song. And that's my first pick. Sonny Rollins, tenor sax, Waiting on a Friend.
That is such a great pick, and Tattoo You is my favorite Rolling Stones album, and that's one of my favorite songs of theirs, and so that's a great pick. I'm a little embarrassed.
Did you pick up the double LP, the special edition, a couple of years?
But I don't currently have a physical copy, so I think that would be a good idea.
Oh,
I think I should pick that up.
And there's a second LP called Lost and Found Rarities, where they had all these, demos and other tracks that didn't make the album. And it's just a valid Rolling Stones album. There's so much in the vault, Todd. Mick, get the keys, get the combination out. But they're like Prince. They've got so many live shows, and they're just so skint in what they release. So, anyway, that's my first pick. What's your next one?
Okay, well, my next one is it's something that I haven't really spent much time with in many years, but growing up and when I was in college, it was very important to me. So important to me that I played it in a band when I was in probably 80, 85, 86, probably. But it's Your Latest Trick by Dire Straits saxophone. It's almost not a saxophone solo. It's almost part of the arrangement. And it was played by Michael Brecker on the record, but it was later played by Chris White, who was Hall & Oates, I'm sorry, who was Dire Straits' live saxophone player, and really beautiful. When I transcribed it, I wrote a transcription of it when I was in college, and I was taking college. I was almost a band director, so I was taking music classes, and so I figured, well, I need to learn how to write manuscript. I'll do that, and I thought that it was, I learned it on the alto saxophone, and I thought that all this time that it was an alto saxophone solo because it sounded right on the alto saxophone, but it's actually a tenor saxophone solo. And great track. It's definite, it's really funny. People talk about, the songs on side 2 of Brothers in Arms as being, everybody knows the songs on side 1, but the songs on side 2 are the really great songs. And then people talk about, Walk of Life, and they talk about So Far Away and all that kind of stuff. But hardly anybody ever talks about Your Latest Trick. And that was the standout track for me when that album came out. And it was interesting too, because that was one of those times when CDs were starting to get really popular. And when Brothers in Arms came out, the CD was longer than the record. And the CD starts with a flugelhorn solo, which isn't on the vinyl and all that stuff. So it was I found all of that completely fascinating. But Your Latest Trick has always been a favorite Dire Straits song. I used to really love it. I don't spend very much time with it anymore, but I had to pick it. Yeah, I felt obligated.
Absolutely. And now it's in my head. Thank you, Todd Evans.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's not my favorite Dire Straits album, but I can tell you in 1986, if you went to a stereo store, the shop clerk was going to demonstrate what the stereo speakers were sounding like. That album was flogged, especially the start of Money for Nothing. That was like the quintessential first CD album, just to show your stereo speakers are in order. It's just
and it's kind of like when you're in college. It was kind of like "Sweet Child of Mine" by Guns N' Roses. People would crank up the beginning until the band actually really starts playing, and then they turn it down.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I would imagine that is head and shoulders the biggest selling in the Dire Straits catalog, and still is sold to this day. So that's good. That's a good pick. I'm going to go back in time, something a little bit maybe quirky. Now, this band were one of the godfathers of garage punk. And the band I'm talking about is the Sonics. So I don't know if you've heard of the Sonics. 1963, 1964. They were around for a very short period of time. And the song I'm going to do is Psycho. There's nothing special about the sax in the song per se from a solo perspective, but it's all the way. It's part of the riff. And they were sort of outrageous for their times, and they're getting a lot of recognition. People looking back and thinking this is probably one of the godfathers or the originators of punk rock. There's a bit of a lineage. The lead vocals, Jerry Rossley, he had that Little Richard projection of the voice, and Rob Lind on saxophone with all the rest of the band. I saw them play about 10 years ago. The Hoodoo Gurus did this invitational festival, and they were one of the bands, and they were on stage. And quite frankly, they were one of the hardest hitting bands on the night. They were fantastic. The lyrics for that era, you turn me on, you shut me down, Psycho. Just listen to it. It's as hard as any garage punk from the 70s or 80s. And we're talking about, 1965. So if you want to have the polar opposite to the Beatles, which were all nice, and something that's a little bit darker and a bit scuzzy, the Sonics and Psycho. And I picked it because the sax is all the way through. Think about if Louie Louie was, on acid. This is it, the Psychos.
I've heard of that band, but I'm not familiar with that track.
Sonic Psycho, yeah.
I've got to spend some time with that.
Absolutely. If you love garage punk.
I do that, and that's a great pick.
Yeah.
Oh, I learned something. Good.
All right, over to you.
All right. Well, my next pick, I don't have a prop for because I don't have a physical copy of this, but it's going to be Urgent by Foreigner, 1981, and played by Junior Walker, who was a Motown artist who coincidentally happened to be performing in New York at the time of the sessions for Foreigner 4 and was asked to do it and said, sure. And played on the tenor saxophone, but it almost is very high register. It almost sounds like an alto saxophone as well, like the other song I was talking about. It was recorded on the first take. There's a great quote by Thomas Dolby where he was saying that Mutt Lange was making him play like the simplest keyboard parts over and over and over again until he got them perfect. And when Junior Walker came in to play the solo, he took the first take because he was like, "Oh, that one's that's the best one. We'll take the first take. You're done." And I thought that was great. I didn't realize this until I looked it up. The Foreigner's regular live and recording saxophone player was a guy named Mark Riviera, and he plays the rhythmic sax part during the song, during the parts that aren't the solo. And I always wondered if that was Junior Walker too, but it's not. It's Mark Riviera. And there was some conflicting information as to whether or not Mark Riviera also recorded a version of the solo, but played by Junior Walker. Fantastic. When it came out, I was just absolutely blown away by that song. I already liked Foreigner, and I felt like only in recent times have I started feeling like the rest of that album lives up to Urgent. But and I'm starting to feel that way now. But at the time, I thought, oh, Urgent is far and away the best song on that album.
Yeah.
But that's my third choice.
That's outstanding. And that was one of my honorable picks. And that was definitely in the firing line for my top 5. It's head and shoulders my favorite Foreigner song. And that sax solo soars. I think on a very best of Foreigner, there's actually a bonus track where they play that song acoustically, and the saxophone is also played, and it comes out even more to the fore. It's just wonderful. And I know a lot of folk that really don't like Foreigner because they're American orientated rock or they're corporate that like that song. But
that's it's a really unique song for them. And one of the things that I think is so great about that particular era of Foreigner is that for a while there, every album had something really unique on it. Like Four had Urgent, and Agent Provocateur had I Want to Know What Love Is, which was really not like anything else. And so it was a really creative time for them. And it's just the rhythmic parts of the saxophone parts in the middle of the song are really cool too. And they really add to that atmosphere. And it's just one of my absolute favorites.
Yeah. Well, I think Mutt sort of recognized that jazz, you can't do multiple takes. I mean, Mutt, you can't, this is not Def Leppard. It's not going to take 3 years and 500,000 takes. Let them in. Just riff it and go for it. So
and he made the right call for sure.
Absolutely. And if he started doing multiple takes, you might have had the risk that he might have just said, "See you later. I'm not going to be," because that's not the done thing. But no, that's a great pick. No, wonderful, good stuff. All right, my next pick is Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon album, Money.
Yeah,
I love that. That
absolutely one of the best
solo,
ones. One of my honorable mentions.
Tenor saxophone. It's such a strange saxophone solo because it's sort of in a different time signature. It's in 7/4. It's kind of rhythmic, and you listen to the saxophone. It's sort of speaking. It's very lyrical. It's very expressive, and it just adds so much oomph to that song. And the segue from the sax solo into that searing Dave Gilmour solo is something to behold. Mm-hmm. It's if you were looking and discussing the strong high points of that album, which is a masterpiece, that sax solo is right up there as one of the high points of that album. But Money, Dick Parry, it's legendary.
Yeah, and it made absolutely necessary that anytime Pink Floyd or Roger Waters toured, they always had to have a saxophone player. There's no replacing that with something else.
Yeah. And I'll put a few little honorable mentions about Dick Parry's other work with the Floyd. Us and Them. That's a great one. Shine On You Crazy Diamond. Sublime work.
Oh, yeah.
Sublime work. Okay. What's your next pick?
Okay, well, I kind of arranged these in an order of like saving the best for last. And I thought that this one was going to be my last one, but then I remembered one that I couldn't believe I wasn't putting first and foremost. So this one is my second to last pick. And this is a song that nobody talks about. It's Midnight Rocks by Al Stewart, 1980. Now, this song, out of all of the singles that Al Stewart had, they're all great. You're the Cat, Song on the Radio, Time Passages, they're all great songs. And they've all got great guitar solos and great playing in them and Alan Parsons engineering and all that stuff. But to me, Midnight Rocks is the best Al Stewart song. Melodically, that song is just instant chills for me. It's very simple and it's very beautiful. It's a gorgeous chord progression. But this alto saxophone solo in Midnight Rocks is just cuckoo bananas. I mean, I can't even think of words to describe it. I mean, it's just, I tried to research it because I thought, maybe somebody wrote something about it because it's got the highest alto saxophone notes I've ever heard in my life. And there's this one part of it just before the end. I think it's right as the song is fading out, where you think he's hit the highest note he can hit, and he goes one higher. And I wanted to be able to say, what note that is. But the solo in Midnight Rocks, played by a guy named Brian Savage, who was also in Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. And he's played with the Amazing Rhythm Aces and Steve Martin. He plays the saxophone solo on King Tut by Steve Martin. And just phenomenal saxophone player. Everything, all of his solos are great, but Midnight Rocks is just a spectacular song, and I have no idea why it's not considered Al Stewart's finest song. It's just one of my favorite songs of all time.
Yeah.
So now I get to talk about it.
Yeah. No, great. I'm not familiar with that song, so I will track that one down.
His chart success was starting to go down a little bit, and it's top 40, but I should have looked it up, but it's top 40, but not very high on the top 40.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Look, I'm familiar with Year of the Cat, and then I'm a bit of a train spotter, but no, I'm not familiar with that. So I will definitely look that one out. No, well said. Well said. All right. I'm going to go to 1988. This is when the single got released. It's the Australian band INXS. So INXS at their peak, they had lots of sax through Kurt Pengelly. And I'm going to take it off the Kick album and Never Tear Us Apart. So this is one of their signature songs, hit number 7 in the US charts, number 24 in UK, and number 14 in Australia. It's a bit of an iconic song. It's emotional. I think this song really encapsulates what a star that Michael Hutchence was. It's some of his best vocal performance ever. It's just quite emotional. And when Kirk Pengelly comes in with the sax about 2 minutes 40 into the song, it soars and it adds such emotional weight to the lyric, which is really heartfelt, about his bond with his partner or whoever it is. And to a lot of folk who love Michael Hutchence and INXS, this is quite an emotional song because it was played at his funeral, one of the songs. And I think in these parts, it's quite iconic, and it's up there that if you were going to play a top 5 of INXS and the most recognized iconic songs, Never Tear Us Apart will be definitely up there. And the sax solo just adds so much gravitas to the song. You just can't think of it without the sax solo. So that's my pick, Never Tear Us Apart.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. And the thing that I thought was always so great about INXS is that they did everything with so much fire. Like just the drum fills in Never Tear Us Apart, which is kind of a sweet song, are just so aggressive, and they're played so loudly and so crisply and so accurately that it's just the perfect setup to that saxophone solo. And it's just, and then they give him some space to play during it. But I can remember hearing INXS songs for the first time when I think I was probably in college, 84, 85, 86, and just thinking, what an incredible band. How are they? I mean, I know they're popular, but they didn't get it. I don't think they ever got enough credit for what good musicians they were and how well they could play.
Absolutely.
Everybody in that whole band.
And they were huge for a period of time. In America, they sort of conquered America.
I saw them at Six Flags.
7
at an amusement park.
7 million copies of Kick. X did fabulously well, and then there was a bit of a slippery slope. But they're not getting the recognition they deserve because they, for a period of time, they were right up there. And look, Michael Hutchence was easily one of the greatest frontmen to come out of the country, along with Bon Scott. He just had charisma in spades. But beyond the way he looked and his charisma, he had a fantastic voice. And
he did. And one of the other great things about him was that his charisma was timeless. It wasn't 80s, and it wasn't 70s, and it wasn't 90s. He could have been himself exactly as he was then. He were still with us today, and it wouldn't be like a nostalgia show. It was timeless.
Absolutely. But getting back to the purpose of this show, the sax solo
Right.
does add so much gravitas, so much emotional weight to it. And that's one, like there can be songs where you just throw a sax line in and, you know, that's just part of the song, but that actually adds so much weight and just improves it tenfold.
And I think kind of like I Can't Go For That. I think that's one everybody knows.
Yes.
Even if you have to remind them of it, they'll be like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great one.
Absolutely.
Excellent choice. Excellent choice.
Thank you.
Okay, well, this is my final. This is my final pick, and I'm going to go right out and say it. This is the finest saxophone solo in rock music of all time, and change my mind. Supertramp, Crime of the Century, and I'm not talking about this version. I'm talking about this version. One of the version of Crime of the Century from this album, Paris, recorded in 1979, released in 1980, is one of the most powerful pieces of music I've ever heard in my life. It sounds like Rick Davies is absolutely pounding the absolute crap out of the piano. He's hitting the keys so hard. And the drum part is so loud, and there's bass drum and there's bass pedals. And but the saxophone solo played by, of course, John Helliwell is one of my favorites of all time. And the way he nails that solo on that live version from the Paris album is just unbeatable. It's my favorite saxophone solo of any genre of music of all time, and hopefully I'm not overhyping it. I don't think I possibly could.
No.
But in fact, for my notes for this episode, I didn't even write anything down. It just says John Helliwell, tenor saxophone, and that's it. Because I could rave about it for hours. I absolutely love it. He's great on that entire album. He plays the clarinet and all kinds of stuff. But on Crime of the Century, just absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, look, great band. I just wish they could get back together. It's not going to happen. They're all alive. They're all alive, aren't they?
Yeah.
But they're just they're just not talking. And that's just one of the rare examples where a band is, when they finished up, they actually finished up. You know, it's sort of like the contract is like the ink is dried and that's it. Great sax solo, great song. I actually did an honorable mention because there's a lot of great sax all the way through their discography. I was going to pick It's Raining Again. I love the sax.
I love that one too. And you know which other one I like a lot, and it almost rivals this one. Almost is My Kind of Lady from that same album. Wow, so many great solos.
But the kids are getting into Supertramp, because great bands transcend decades. And you've got bands like the Lemon Twigs, folks, look them up, that are mining a lot of the Supertramp catalog. And
I've just started listening to them.
Absolutely. So people will discover, if the music is good, people will discover it. And, you know, a band that has such a strong discography, so many great songs, you know, they went through a period, I think in the 90s and the early 2000s where, you know, they were just playing the classic hits and rock and roll circuit. You know, people are now rediscovering how truly great Supertramp is. And that's, you know, those two albums that you've just put up are an example of what, you know, people need to discover.
Yeah, I saw them in 97 at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles when I was living in LA, and I saw them again in 2002. And that was on my bucket list. Supertramp and Utopia were the last bands left that I hadn't seen, that I always wanted to see, and I didn't think I would have a chance to. And this may be controversial. I noticed that there's a lot of bias in the online music community about Roger Hodgson, but I am team Rick. I'm team Rick Davies. I love both of those gentlemen, but Rick Davies to me is the heart of Supertramp. And so when he toured with his own version of the band, I was equally satisfied with that.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Somebody might throw. I mean, they never said that ABBA would get back together.
Right.
It's not really a rock Daydream Nation type of band, but I'm just giving you an example, folks, because
Well,
of all the
Roger's
bands
still
that
active,
yeah, there are
and
some
Rick Davies, I don't think is in the best of health, and so
yeah,
that could be a reason why that won't happen again.
Eagles. Hell freezes over again.
Right. Right. I just read an article about them today.
Absolutely. So I think in rock, never say never. The greenback always wins. So you never know. You never know. But no, great pick. As I said, they were one of my honorable mentions because you just cannot do a show on saxophone and not include or refer to one Supertramp song. So, yeah.
Right.
I'm going to finish up with a little bit more Australia, and I'm talking about Ivor Davies and his band Icehouse. And from 1984, a song called Don't Believe Anymore. This is such a haunting ballad, and it's sort of a very slow build. It's got synth, it's got drama. The lyrics are very dark. It's about a relationship which is just full of despair. And, there's this saxophone line all the way through that's played by Joe Camilleri. Joe Camilleri is known for bands like Jojo Zepp and the Falcons or the Black Sorrows, if you're from these parts or maybe overseas, you're familiar. But it's just a divine sax line, and it's one where it intertwines with the melody and the mood of the piece and just builds it into something that's kind of symphonic and dramatic. And I think it's one of Icehouse's greatest ballads or songs. Don't Believe Anymore. It's off the Sidewalk album of 1984. And look, they're a very underrated band, Icehouse. There's a lot
very
of their
strange
stuff
about Icehouse in the States. They had like a minute in, I think it was probably 81 or 82. And after that, my friends who I worked with in the record store, we would always, when an Icehouse album would come out, we would actually say out loud to each other, "What is the deal with Icehouse? Why doesn't anybody in that? Why are they not huge in the States? I don't understand that. I never understood that.
I had a top 10.
There's no reason for them to not be popular here, but it just didn't work."
Yeah, they had. I think their two biggest hits were off the Man of Colors album. They had Electric Blue, which was that had John Oates did a co-write, and that went top 10, and Crazy, which went to top 30. But
was I wrong on the years? Is that later? Is that like 83?
It was
1986.
1986.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I was off then.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. I never understood that. I don't know why that happened.
Well, another one of those bands that were big in the homeland but didn't translate overseas. But there's so many. But this song, I just love it because the sax is just so front and center, and it just adds so much emotional weight. It's such an expressive instrument. It is. I love it. And but anyway, Joe Camilleri with doing the sax for Don't Believe Anymore for Icehouse. So, Todd, probably some honorable mentions.
Well, the only one that I prepared was one that I was certain was going to make my list, and that's All Mixed Up, the Cars. And the reason I didn't put it on my list, even though it's a personal favorite of mine, played by Greg Hawkes, right there. And the reason I didn't put it on my list is that technically it's really not the greatest saxophone solo, but I love it for the way it stands out on that Cars album. It almost doesn't fit, but in like a really glorious way. It's like it sticks out like a sore thumb, but like in a good way. And the very first band I was ever in high school called Paradox, I played the saxophone, so I can only play on songs that had saxophone in them. And I picked that song to play. And of course, it's the Cars song nobody knows. And so that went over really well. But it's probably my favorite Cars song. And I think that Greg Hawkes is a massive talent and a really nice guy. Played on the alto saxophone. one of the things that I think is so cool about Greg Hawkes is that he started out, his first professional job was playing with Martin Mull. Do you know who Martin Mull is, the comedic actor?
Yes.
He was on Roseanne and had his own syndication shows in the late 70s.
I'm visualizing him.
He was a musician first, and he had a music career first, and it kind of morphed into a comedic music career. But he's a guitarist, really great guitarist. And he had a band called Martin Mull and His Fabulous Furniture. And if you search really hard on YouTube, that his band did like a pilot for a sketch comedy show in it's probably like 1976 or something like that. And Greg Hawkes is in the cast. And which is really cool. Greg Hawkes trivia, at least I thought it was. But all mixed up by the Cars. That was really the only honorable mention that I actually prepared.
No, that's great. Great pick. Up the Cars, they're another band where their stocks are just getting up and up and up.
Yeah.
Like in the day, they probably didn't get the critical appraisal that they're getting now. And so many fans, whether they're into metal, punk, they love the Cars. They're like a cross genre band that everybody loves, isn't it?
Yeah, and some of the best guitar solos of all time. I could go on and on about the Cars. One of the things that I remember about the Cars growing up when I was much younger and when they were a much newer band was that there was this myth. There was this kind of a rumor about them was that people would go see them and they would say, "Oh, they're no good live." And I have seen footage of them in like 1978 and 1979, and I think that they sound fantastic live. I saw them in 1984 and thought they were great. So, absolutely love the Cars.
They were one of the few bands that never made Australia, and I think our exposure to them live may have been limited to Live Aid, which, in due respect, was probably not one of their greatest, finest moments.
No.
Where, the Heartbreak City album was at the fore. But look, their reputation is just growing incrementally. And they didn't really have that sort of accolade in the day. So it's an interesting case study of a band through time and people discovering them, hopefully like Supertramp that,
and their performance on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction without Benjamin Orr, with the guy from Weezer, I think, stepping in. It was great. I mean, and they were in their 70s. And so I've always thought they were a great band. I saw them in, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I saw them on the Door to Door tour and in Atlanta, and it was the venue was probably 1/3 full, and it was the most, the most empty seats I'd ever seen in that venue, and it's such a great show. They had this big set with all these TV sets and everything, and I remember turning to my friend and going, "I think we're seeing the end of the Cars." And that's what it was. But
I read about it. Rolling Stone were definitely on the, they're over and out.
Right.
On the basis of that tour. But no, great pick.
Which made me mad.
Yeah, I know. Look, I think I said it on another show. I like supporting bands like football teams, and, you just want them to do well and go up in the charts and be, just do fabulous. But anyway. You got to pick Jerry Rafferty, Baker Street. That's that. I mean, the summer of '78 was that saxophone solo was on every AM classic hits. I think it's probably the only song I really know of Jerry Rafferty. But Baker Street.
I considered that. There were just too many in front of it, and neither one of us picked anything from Bruce Springsteen. But
yeah.
When I was a kid growing up playing the saxophone, people would say, "Oh, you play the saxophone. You must love Springsteen." And I'd be like, "No." "Oh, you must love Jerry Rafferty." It's okay.
Springsteen interesting.
I've grown to really love some of those.
Springsteen's probably one of my retirement package. I've got to get into the catalog and look. I've got bugger all Springsteen in my discography. He's probably one artist I need to explore. But no, I didn't really think about Springsteen, but I did think about Jerry Rafferty because that was the sax solo that sort of conquered the world. But
I thought about Quarter Flash. Harden My Heart.
Damn it.
And I didn't pick it because I think melodically that solo isn't really very good, but everybody knows it. It's another song I played in my first high school band. But there are other, she's a good player, and there are other Quarter Flash songs that I think have better solos in them.
Yeah.
But
that is such
I thought about maybe picking that one.
That is, that was in the Rock of Ages musical, and that is a really hard song to sing. Just the key. It's a great song. Look, I agree. It's not the flashiest sax solo, but it's so integral to that song and why it was so successful. It was actually, they're a bit of a one-hit wonder. That was their only real hit, wasn't it? I've got that album.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. Mate, this has probably got legs. We could probably do a part 2 and part 3, but I think we've covered off. The Who with Love Reign Over Me.
Yeah.
And we could go into that whole sort of genre of brass bands like Earth, Wind and Fire if we wanted to. And
Chicago. I thought of Chicago, but all of my favorite solos by the saxophone player in Chicago are actually flute solos. So I didn't pick anything from Chicago, but I could have.
Tina Turner, Simply the Best. I'm thinking of that Muscle Man.
Yeah.
You know, the he like every second Tina Turner song in the 80s seemed to have a bit of a sax solo. David Bowie.
Yeah.
Modern Love.
Mm-hmm.
See, you know, we've got this late wind in the show. All these different ideas are coming through. No, anyway. Todd, as always, wonderful to have you on the show. I think we've covered some really good selections. My perspective, are they the 5 greatest sax solos? No, or sax lines, but they're kind of 5 favorite because there's so many.
Yeah, I was very selfish with my picks. They're all my favorites.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I didn't bring a saxophone along. I don't currently own one, but
next time.
I'm a little rusty, but I need to pick it back up.
I'll hold you to it. I'll hold you to it. All right. Thank you very much coming on, Todd. As always, you can see him on the Contrarians, RushFans, Grant's Rock Warehouse, Bicyclelegs. Please like and subscribe to my little channel, which is called Rock Daydream Nation. Click the bell, put a comment, put a like. We love reading your comments. But one thing's guaranteed, you'll see me and Todd blabbing about some topic on music very, very soon. Cheers.